and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. This is the show where I speak with the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I am super excited to be joined by the very wonderful Julia Champion. Now, Julia, as a number of you may know already, is one of the most well-known agents in the industry for television presenters and television experts. She's had over 2 decades worth of experience in talent management, worked for some of the largest, most established agencies, and more recently been working as artist manager for a number of different firms and presenters, as well as working for some of the most well-known TV presenters in the UK history. She's also my new agent, which I'm super excited to say, and really keen to be learning not only more about Julia's background and how she came to be where she is today, but also why she's so very passionate about gender equality and diversity, inclusion and belonging, both on and off screen. Julia, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So for those that perhaps don't know you as well as I do, tell me a little bit about the story, your personal story. How did you end up running one of the most well-established talent agencies, Champion Talent, and what was it that really kind of drove, I suppose, some of those personal ambitions that you had?
Well, I come from quite a creative family. My parents are both artists. That's one of my dad's pictures behind me. And I always fancied working in television, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I did a communication and media degree. And after that, I got a job for BBC Radio Suffolk. So I'm from Suffolk, so I got a job working from Ipswich, my sort of hometown, and absolutely loved it. The pay was terrible, but I met some fantastic friends. And when you work in a small BBC outlet like that, you do everything from making the tea to actually broadcasting yourself. I never wanted to be a presenter. I always wanted to be behind the scenes. So I worked my way up from researcher to producer to senior producer, and then worked at various other BBC local stations, and eventually got a job as a producer for Talk Radio when it launched in London. And I was only in my mid-20s then, and it was all very exciting. You know, I was getting chauffeur-driven cars into the studio and a lot of responsibility, and it was all very exciting, launching something new with all these big name stars. And then one time I had a researcher called Mike Sissons, who was the son of the late Peter Sissons, the newsreader. And I went to a barbecue at Mike's house. He was one of my researchers who, bless him, only got there through nepotism because he wasn't very good, but he was a very nice guy. And his dad, Peter Sissons, gave me a lift back to the train station when the barbecue was finished. And he was a bit of a flirt. And he was sort of chatting me up in the car and saying, you know, I was a lot slimmer and a lot more attractive in those days. And he said, oh, what do you want to do with your life, Julia? What do you want to do with your life? And can I help? And I said, well, I've always fancied being a television agent, but I don't know how to get into it. He goes, leave it with me. I'll speak to my agents and see if they can offer you a job. So he did. And thanks to Peter Sissons, I got a job working at a company called Knight Ayton Management that's still going. But the 2 women that ran it were out of the office a lot of the time. And so I ended up having quite a lot of responsibility for the clients when they were absent. And it went from there, really. I just sort of learnt on the job. I had to take a bit of a salary drop when I changed careers, but I was sort of poacher turned gamekeeper anyway. So I sort of knew the business. And in my degree, I'd learned quite a lot about media law. So I knew how to find my way through a contract and so on and so forth. And being an agent, a lot of it is just who you know and as well as what you know. So knowing which production companies are looking for what sort of presenter etc., etc., which commissioners are heading up the different channels and choosing which projects they go for. Then I was headhunted, which was very exciting, to work with a fantastic man called John Roseman, and I worked at a company called the Roseman Organisation, which back in the day were sort of one of the bigger players in the industry, and we looked after people like Jill Dando, who sadly got murdered. We looked after Fern Britton, Monty Don, Kate Garraway, Penny Smith, quite a lot of big names, and I was working there and ended up working there for quite a long time. Then I had my children, worked at James Grant Management, which is one of the biggest agencies. They look after Anton Deck and Paddy McGuinness and Tess Daly and Holly Willoughby. Well, they don't look after Holly anymore. But back when I was working there, they looked after lots of big names. And then I left there and set up Champion Talent with my business partner, Jane Jackson, in 2010, and we've just gone from strength to strength.
Wow, what a roller coaster journey that is.
It's funny how you fall into things sometimes. It was just I just fancied the idea of being an agent because I thought it was terribly glamorous and glitzy, and parts of it that is true, although we haven't had much glitz and glamour in the last year.
I love it though. When I said, tell me about how you came to be in a nutshell, it is a really big nutshell and a wonderful one. No, and a wonderful one at that. And, you know, what I really love as well is that you have this kind of this humility and modesty about the fact that ultimately you are the most well-known talent agent in the UK and beyond. And, you know, some of the names you mentioned, everyone from kind of Jill Dando through to Fern Britton, you know, they're much loved and cherished British household names. And, you know, I think it's fascinating hearing the story of where you have come from to, I guess, where you are now as a successful business owner, running what is actually a female-led organisation, and championing, well, not to sound too biased here, the best talent.
Oh, it is naturally, yeah.
naturally. And Julia, tell me a little bit about kind of, you know, not only some of the people that you managed, you've got a, you know, fabulous kind of roster of diverse individuals that obviously you represent. How have you seen the last decade or so really change and move towards what is ultimately more diversity on screens, more diversity off screens, and really looking at how we champion the gender agenda, for want of a better expression?
Oh, I think sort of old-fashioned ideas where programs like Good Morning Britain had to be fronted by a man and a woman, and This Morning had to be fronted by a man and a woman. Quite often now they'll have two women presenting at the same time, and it doesn't matter if they're both blonde or if they're both black. Or I saw an episode of Loose Women quite recently where the whole panel were black women, and I thought, goodness me, we've made some strides ahead. Also, a lot of some of the television channels, the BBC and Channel 4 particularly, have diversity, people who are heads of diversity at those channels. So they're actively encouraging more non-white faces on screen, which is a great thing. They're also trying to get more people with disabilities, more mums. You know, it was a no-no 20 years ago to be pregnant on screen, and now you see programs like A Place in the Sun with heavily pregnant presenters, and it's not a problem. They even I've looked after several of the Place in the Sun presenters, and they're so accommodating for mothers. They let the presenters take their children with them on shoots. They pay for the nanny's flight and accommodation, and so the presenters can go out there with their young children, and it's not a problem. That would never have happened 20 years ago. There's a lot more empathy and sympathy towards working parents these days.
That is so heartwarming to hear, whilst at the same time, obviously being, myself and yourself very passionate about moving the dial when it comes to diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, does make you wonder, on the one sense, how was it okay that things like this were really a no-no 2 decades ago?
I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Janet Ellis was, I think she was pregnant on Blue Peter 25 years ago with a long-term partner, but just because they weren't married, it was a big scandal that she was having this baby out of wedlock. And it's almost laughable now when you look back on it.
It's absolutely amazing. And I mean, what you're describing is almost, I mean, on the one hand, I think it is, it's systemic. I think it is slightly bred into us on the one hand, because we've watched and seen what is the normal, in inverted commas, on our screens and in our magazines, wherever it may be, read about individuals that would be the normal, in inverted commas. And we now watch organizations like Unilever, who've got a huge campaign on where they're eradicating the word normal from their brands.
Yeah.
And it begs the question, what actually is the norm? When you describe this being such a black and white no kind of 20 years ago, which you're right, in reality, it's a very short period of time. Look how far we have come in that time to where we are right now. And it is fabulous to see the organizations and production houses as well, watching what's happening with Netflix and the amount of funds and capital they're putting into diversity media and casting talent that does not look or sound like the usual stereotype.
Yeah, definitely. And there's even more acceptance of people with different regional accents. It's gone that far. Although some regional accents seem to be more acceptable than others. It's fine to be a Scot or from the Northeast and have they have an accent from there. But, Brummie and Cornish doesn't go down quite so well. It's funny how some accents are acceptable and some aren't.
Absolutely agree. I remember speaking to Clive Myrie about this, and he said to me, when I came down from Manchester, and he was really kind of the second most well-known black TV presenter after Sir Trevor McDonald. He said he actually changed his accent to be more London, as it were, than to be so Manchester, because that's what was acceptable back in the day. Now it would be, very much, I mean, I think people do seem to, without generalizing here too much, seem to love the proper British accent. But at the same time, what is the proper British accent? Is it not proper to be from Manchester, or from the north where I am from, or from miles down south? What is the norm?
Yeah, exactly. I think Anton Deck led the way with Geordie accents, and that's seen as the thing now. Also, I know when they were casting for Celebrity MasterChef, they wanted a few clients that had regional accents because they thought it appealed to the C2DE demographic. They didn't want everyone to be what they say, male, pale and stale. They wanted diversity in every way, and that included, people from different classes. People like the Hairy Bikers have done really, really well because they've played on the fact that they're Geordies through and through, and they come from sort of working class roots, and people like that nowadays.
No, I absolutely concur. I think there is, I mean, I do, have a laugh and a joke with my husband, who I say is a middle-aged white male, but ultimately he is more diverse in many senses than me, given the fact that he speaks fluent Mandarin as an American Greek. Wow. It's, it does still baffle me. And I tell you what, it really confuses them if we go into a Chinese restaurant or a takeaway when they're speaking to me in Chinese, or I'm actually not sure what they're speaking. Could be Cantonese, could be Mandarin, and he'll reply back I know, and he'll respond in fluent Mandarin. They kind of look backwards and forwards from us, wondering why I am not responding.
Yeah, brilliant.
Well, we were actually in a Chinese Chinese supermarket local to us the other day, and the lady who was at the till said, "Your wife does not speak very good Mandarin." Apparently, this is what he told me afterwards, and I suddenly felt, oh my goodness, I feel like a phony because I can't speak fluently, even though I look the part. But yeah, I mean, coming back on your point, when it comes to the Geordie accent, I think, I mean, the hairy bikers, they're just blooming fantastic, aren't they? But it's that real kind of salt of the earth, working class roots, which I think people really buy into. It's the fact that actually, when it comes to diversity, what do we actually mean? It means difference, but that could be difference, as you say, in terms of accents. It could be difference in terms of colour of our skin. And where we are from culturally, but it could also be social mobility, could be the certain demographics from where we are from. But ultimately, it's making sure the media and our representation of presenters and whom and what we see on our screens, which is what you do so well, is actually truly represented in the backgrounds, and therefore the communities that we serve, who will be watching on screen, off screen, listening to those different dialects, voices, etc., etc.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I've got to ask, Julia, why did you never want to go on the front side of the camera?
I'd be absolutely terrible. I'd be like a rabbit caught in the headlights. I'd be terrible. When I worked in local radio, as I said, they get you to do everything. And so I occasionally did traffic and travel reports, or I occasionally did like a co-presenter role. But it makes me wince when I listen back to the recordings, because I thought you had to be terribly, terribly BBC. So I had this sort of Suffolk / Essex accent, and I was trying to speak properly, and I just sound like this when I listen back to the tape. And it's just ghastly. I just couldn't be myself, and I couldn't. Whereas in my job now, I don't even think about what I'm going to ask people. If I was thrown into a live interview situation, if I didn't have a list of questions and prompt notes with me, I'd panic. Whereas, the best presenters just do things off the top of their heads quite naturally. Sorry, my phone's pinging. I'll turn it off.
No, it's fine. Just shows how popular you are. It's all good. It's all good. Ping, ping, ping. But and I love that story actually, Julia, because it is, and I think it's honestly something that we all as human beings feel, is that genuine sense of belonging. Do we feel we belong enough in order to be ourselves? Where you are right now at the helm of the business that you run, and in the position of influence that you are in, there is no need to pretend to be something that you are not.
No.
Back in the day, it was the very proper kind of behaving a certain way in order to get through the door and what have you. I find it admirable that it doesn't matter who or what or where you are from. It is actually about being your true, authentic self, ultimately.
Yeah. The bad thing about being, I absolutely love my job, and I feel it's a real vocation. I couldn't really do anything else now. But the thing about being an agent is that when somebody's career is going well, they think the client think it's because of their talent. But when a client's career isn't doing so well, they blame the agent. So you're in a bit of a no-win situation, really.
Well, I empathise with that from the former headhunting perspective. Yeah. It's like you're everyone's best mate when the when everything is going swimmingly, and when the chips are down, it's kind of, hey, don't shoot the messenger kind of situation.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, and there's a million and one questions that I want to ask you, Julia, because I think, what you have done, the reputation and the business you have built over the last couple of decades really precedes you. But I got to get into our lightning round very shortly before I end up running out of time and not managing to squeeze in everything that I want to ask you. But before I do, I wonder, what do you see in the future of TV and on-screen, off-screen talent? Where do you see that future headed when it comes to really, embracing what you are very much about, and that is an eclectic mix of really talented individuals from all walks of life?
Yeah, I think the future's looking bright for diversity and inclusion. I think we'll see a lot more black and brown faces on television. I think we'll see more people with disabilities. If I was approached by people with disabilities, they would go to the top of the pile, but I just never get approached by anyone with disabilities, and I would welcome approaches from that section of people. I think now that there's diversity champions at the different channels who are actively encouraging diversity on and off screen, I think it can only have a positive effect on who we see. And I think the more people we see on telly that represent all people, people will look up to the people they see on TV and think, I can do that. And then they'll get more people from those groups of the population and everything will get better. It's a positive asset to not be white and to have a disability, if you want to work in television at the moment. They're really, really driving it forward.
Well, that is great to hear. And I think what you're saying is it's about ultimately leveling the playing field, making sure the communities in which are consuming media content have got the representation, where, as you say, they feel like, well, if I can see the individual that I'm looking up to, or the individuals that I'm looking up to, then I can truly be that. And it's
that's what they say, see it to be it, don't they?
Indeed. And I remember growing up in Yorkshire, as I've told you before, and not seeing any East Asian faces. And I wonder, whilst I'm terribly inspired by my white British mother and father, actually it is, it's something that you cannot describe, really, not seeing yourself in some way, shape or form represented, because it almost tells you, can people like me, or can people like us get to those amazing places, whether it be in the boardroom, whether it be on the TV screen, whether it be even on the radio. So going into the very short lightning round, Julia, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to answer each of the next questions. I know for you and I, that's really hard, because actually we could go on chit-chatting for forever and a day. Because it's you, I'll maybe give you a little bit longer than 30 seconds for each of the questions. And I guess I'm going to ask probably the most challenging question first, and that is, what would you say is your secret to success, if there is one?
I think being able to spot what the next big thing is going to be. That's short enough.
Great answer. Great answer. And who have been the biggest inspirations in your life? Or it could be an inspiration, could be personal.
Well, John Roseman, my former boss, at the Roseman organisation, where we looked after Giordano and so on, he was a fantastic mentor to me. I just loved hearing him on the phone negotiating a deal. He just didn't take any crap. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast? It's a pretty bad word. He said to me, and I think he's absolutely right, he said, "You're the best agent I've ever known, but you need to learn one thing." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "You need to learn to be more of a CUNT."
Oh my goodness. Yes, the answer is you can swear on this podcast. We put a censored mark on it beforehand. But now I've got to ask, tell me, how did the negotiation call go? Because I know that you are a tough, in a great way, businesswoman, as well as having the emotional empathy and articulation that I think is really, really necessary when it comes to ultimately balancing both sides and making sure people are looked after.
Yeah, one of my clients said to me that I'm a friendly babe with a brick in her handbag. I thought that was a great description.
We don't want to go too near your handbags then. Watch out if you meet Julia in the street and she's got a very heavy looking handbag.
The thing is, an agent will always know what the going rate is for something. I think, you know, a lot of presenters, particularly when they're starting out, just don't know how to price themselves and don't know how to protect themselves in terms of, you know, not just the pay, but the terms and conditions of a contract. And we're there to sort of tell them what to, ask for what they deserve, basically.
Well, I feel very well protected working with you, Julia. But I got to ask, how was this call then with John Roman? If he was absolutely, because I'm imagining it as you're talking. I've got these pictures in my mind of like old school phones being slammed down and kind of being in a studio.
This was back in the day when he used to smoke big cigars all the time because anyone could smoke in the office at the time. So we worked in this fug. And his favourite thing was, what part of the word no do you not understand? Plonk.
With some great big cigar in his hand. I can just imagine it with like the production.
Yeah, suit, sports car. He was, you know, he was a fantastic Jewish, almost like a parody of himself. It was funny.
Oh, absolutely love it. And finally, so there's a million. We can get you back again though, Julia. We could do part 2 with Julia Champion. But last question before we run out of time is, if you could go back in time and speak to the young Julia who was about to head out into the wide open world, and she was, perhaps having the barbecue again and kind of, what do you want to do, Julia? Conversations. What would you tell yourself if you were to be able to advise your younger self, or indeed someone else who'd love to be where you are today now?
I would say you've got to be prepared to go back sometimes to go forward. As I said, I took a pay drop from being a senior producer on a national station to effectively be an agent's assistant and work my way up. But sometimes you've got to go back to go forward, and don't be scared of anything. No one is better than you. So, you know your worth, basically. And, you know, I have always been a really good people person. And I think that the primary attribute for an agent to be is warm and welcoming and not scary, and be a good people person who can keep lots of balls in the air. And if you've got that personality, I think you've either got it or you haven't. And in a way, I wish somebody had pointed out to me before that was my, you know, best quality. Because it took changing careers for me to realise that this was the career for me. But I wish somebody had sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know, you've gone as far as you're going to go as a producer, do something different.
Really wise words of advice, Julia. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been right back at you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. And as I usually do at the end of our podcast, I do a very brief summary, but there's really so much to summarize here. I'm going to keep it very brief, but the real kind of golden nuggets of wisdom that shone out to me, and I hope to our audience as well, who are tuning in today, is really to have confidence in yourself, in your own self self-worth, and in the fact that actually being different is often a huge asset. As we've heard from Julia, the time is now when it comes to really embracing our eclectic and diverse talents, whether it be that you come from a diverse ethnic background, whether it be that you have a disability. Look at the ability, not the disability, and really understand the benefits and the worth that you can bring to the table. Don't be scared to take a career change or a curveball when it comes to doing what it is that you really, really do want to do. And ultimately excuse the pun there, champion yourself and your inner strength, in particular when it comes to gender equality, which, given the fact that it is all about women's empowerment this month, where we've had International Women's Day, I think is incredibly important, because when you lift up one part of the community, you lift up the others as well. As always, if you've missed anything at all, don't worry. You can catch up on demand online at www.dialglobal.org. You can also visit Julia at championtalent.co.uk. You can reach out to her and you can rewind, listen on repeat if you so wish, or on demand as well at the end of today's show. Don't be a stranger. Take care of yourself, and we shall look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.